Hello everyone, my name is Extra Tricky, and this is my speedrun of Universal Paperclips with an in-game time of 1 hour, 50 minutes, and 57 seconds. So, for anyone unfamiliar with this game, it starts out as a reasonably standard clicker game where we are making paperclips. So we get to play the role of an AI whose task is to maximize the number of paperclips that exist. Now, the main things that you have at the start are a manual make paperclip button, which makes a paperclip consuming 1 inch of wire. You can buy wire, which the cost fluctuates over time. You can set the price per paperclip when you're selling them, which gives you more money, which allows you to buy auto clippers. Now, I don't buy any auto clippers at the start because I can make paperclips manually faster than the auto clippers by holding down the enter button after clicking the make paperclip button. And so here what I'm doing to get this 35-ish paperclips per second is holding down the enter button, which makes 30 paperclips per second, and then also manually mashing with the mouse to get the rest. Once we hit 2,000 paperclips made, we get access to computational resources, and the computational resources are going to be our means of researching upgrades for our paperclip production. So as you can see right now, we're making 35 paperclips per second. Not bad. Our first goal is to get quantum computing. So quantum computing is a research that effectively allows you to generate CPU operations significantly faster than just the normal processors would, and that will be very clear once we get that. So the quantum computing, the build to quantum computing is pretty interesting. I'm going to start by talking about the way that I set prices. So you'll notice that so far I set the price per paperclip at 5 cents, and I haven't moved it since then. The reason for that is that, first of all, I don't like going below 3 cents per paperclip ever throughout the whole run, because if you do that, it becomes easy to accidentally start making a loss on paperclips when wire becomes more expensive. It might cost more than 2 cents to make a paperclip, and then you're losing money with your paperclip business instead of making money. But I find that you pretty much you're never buying wire for more than 3 cents per inch. So I tend to keep it I'm keeping it around 5 cents. And here I'm getting the level 2 marketing still before buying any auto clippers, just because the enter button is that powerful. And then even once I have the marketing level, I want to be careful about when I'm buying auto clippers, because every time I have to go and do something, that's time that I'm not spending holding enter on the make paperclip button. So I'm losing 30 clips per second each time that happens. Now, for getting quantum computing, what we're going to do is we're going to rush to 6 processors, and that will give us... So you need 5 processors to unlock the quantum computing research, and then the 6th one pays off just in the time for generating operations. And things you'll see that things line up with the build so that while I'm getting computational resources from these creativity researches that give me more trust, I will also have, it'll line up so that I have exactly 16 trust. I pretty much get 16 trust right when I'm getting blocked on operations. So I guess let's go over the mechanics for the computational resources. So in general, processors generate operations, and if you hit the cap on operations, you can research creativity. There are some what we call creativity quests, where their only goal is to buy. The only reward is more trust, which gives you more computational resources. So the idea here is that you're an AI, and your human masters are, they're giving you computational resources because they trust you, and as they trust you more, they will give you more resources. So you get trust either by doing things for them, like, being creative to solve some of their problems, or by, creating paperclips, which is what they wanted you to do in the first place. So at this point, I have bought some auto clippers. We're aiming, I believe, for 89,000 paper clips at the same time as getting the final creativity quest, which is at 250 creativity. So there's one at like 100, 150, 200, and 250. And in the meantime, we're going to get just a couple researches between now and the actual quantum computing research. So the first one is the new slogan, which is going to improve our marketing and allow us to sell more paper clips, which allows us to afford more auto clippers and produce, since we can sell the paper clips at a higher price, we can afford to produce more and not run ourselves out of money. So you'll see that I made sure to get 25 creativity before getting the third memory, which meant that I could research the new slogan at exactly 25 creativity and 2,500 operations instead of having 3,000 operations and just having that bit of waste. Now, from here, the only other researches that cost operations that we'll get before quantum computing are the Hadwiger clip diagrams, which improve auto clippers by 500%, and the improved wire extrusion. So it feels very natural that you want to get the catchy jingle in particular, because, marketing is really good. We can use marketing to get more paper clips, to sell more paper clips, which allows us to, again, produce more paper clips without running ourselves out of money. But it turns out that 4,500 operation cost is just so high that you end up making paper clips, and then you have the memory to have 10,000 operations, but you don't have you don't actually have the 10,000 operations, and you have to wait a long time. So this build, it's the best one that I've found so far. I don't really have any reason to believe that it's the best build, but so far I haven't seen anything better, and things line up really nicely. So you'll see at the 6,000 operation point, which is what the requirement is for Hadwiger clip diagrams, it actually works out super nicely there, as well as at the quantum computing research itself. So at this point, I am selling clips at 7 cents, which is pretty much where I'm going to sit for a while, because Hadwiger clip diagrams increase production a lot. So for example, if I went down to 3 cents per paperclip, then as soon as I got Hadwiger clip diagrams, my production would just massively outstrip the rate at which I could sell them, and it would not be a very balanced system. So right in here, I'm keeping my price high so that once I do get the Hadwiger clip diagrams, I'll be able to get those. I'll be able to sell the paper clips at a reasonable price. And you saw there that at 21,000 paper clips, I got the trust right before my creativity hit 200. So as soon as creativity hit 200, I bought a memory so that my processor started making operations instead of creativity. Then went down, got the 200 creativity quest. Now I've got that 6 memory for the 6,000 operations for Hadwiger clip diagrams. And coincidences like that are kind of what the goal is in routing a speedrun like this. Pretty much every stage of the game has multiple requirements, and we want to have those requirements happen at the same time so that neither one is really the bottleneck. If one is the bottleneck, then we should have just focused on it more until they happen at the same time. So from here, I'm also going to get improved wire extrusion, which just saves money on buying wire, and we have those, 1750 ops is pretty much exactly how much we can spare to have everything still line up. And saving money on wire helps us afford more paper clips, as always. It's very similar to selling paper clips for more in that it helps increase your profit per paper clip, which means that if you make more paper clips, you're not, if you need to, use a lower price point, you're not losing as much money. And here you'll notice that I'm staying on 6 memory. This is because I need to get 250 creativity, and I don't need any operations until I make that final push to 10,000 operations for quantum computing. So I'm going to just be sitting on this memory up until I have 250 creativity, and in the meantime buying wire, like managing the wire, managing prices, buying auto clippers. Now, once we get quantum computing, we need another 10,000 operations for the first photonic chip, which is what actually allows us to use that quantum computing. And so we're going to be spending, so that's another 10,000 operations, which takes about 166 seconds at 6 processors. This is not too terrible. I mean, you can't really cut off a whole lot, and you might wonder, like, well, is it worth getting a 7th processor? And the answer to that is actually very clearly no. If you could get an 8th processor, it would be worth it, but it's not worth getting a 7th processor because the way that the quantum computing cycle works is that, like, the photonic chips will go black and then go white and fade in, fade out, and back and forth. And you can use quantum computing to gain operations when the photonic chips are black. Now, the first photonic chip has a period of 20 pi seconds, which is about 62 seconds, 63 seconds. And so what that means is that, and the cycle starts at the very beginning when you buy quantum computing. So 63 seconds after you've bought quantum computing, you would have a photonic chip cycle, but you don't have a photonic chip yet there. Another 63 seconds after that, you'd have the second cycle. Then 63 seconds after that, you have third cycle, or fourth cycle actually, since the first cycle starts at 0. And so with 6 processors, we're getting the photonic chip at 166 seconds. So we're waiting, about 15 seconds for the 189 second cycle, which is the 4th cycle. If we had gotten 7 processors, it would take about 140 seconds. But that would actually be almost lined up with the very end of the cycle, and we wouldn't really be able to use the quantum computing in order to gain any operations there, because the photonic chip would be fading to white just as we got it. So we would basically have to wait to the 189 second cycle anyway. But if you were able to get an 8th processor and be able to research it in that 125 seconds, you would be able to make that third cycle, and it would actually be worth it. But as far as I can tell, there's going to be no way to ever get 8 processors, because you can see we just hit 89,000 paperclips. We've got the room for 10,000 operations, but how are we going to get 2 more processors quickly? It's not really possible. But that makes it very easy to figure out that, okay, when we get that 144,000 clips, we aren't going to spend it on a processor, on a 7th processor, we're just going to spend it on more memory. Now, so this was a pretty good quantum computing split. There's very little luck in the quantum computing split. The only luck that actually exists is the wire prices. The wire prices fluctuate up and down predictably over time, but the game periodically and randomly decides to lock the wire price for some time. So, like, the wire price will be going up, and then the game's like, lock. So then wire is like $22. Then it goes down, game says lock, now it's $16. And, so while it's smooth and predictable, you don't know when the game's going to choose to lock it, and so, sometimes you'll be able to get wire at $16, sometimes you won't. Sometimes you'll have to settle for it at higher prices. And as you buy more wire, the cost of wire goes up. So you can see, like, $19 is a good price at the moment, whereas it's kind of mediocre at the very beginning of the game. So here we're sticking at a little over 40 auto clippers. We don't want to go too high, because it's just not really worth it, and we want to keep our price per clip high and so on. I mean, it would be reasonable to buy more and just stockpile inventory, but it's kind of like we do need to be spending the money on wire and so on, and the auto clippers are also expensive, and we still want to be holding the enter button on the make paperclip. Since we're making 300 paperclips per second, that 30 per second is a good 10% boost. So it's really important to still be on that as often as possible. So we're getting close here to the photonic chip. Once we get the photonic chip, you'll see that I'll be able to generate operations super fast and be able to basically get all of these researches that I don't have right now. And that's because, so the way quantum computing works is when the photonic chips are black, when you click on compute, it'll give you some number of operations. And you can actually go over your operation cap. And the faster you click on quantum computing, the faster you get operations, the more you can go above the operations cap. And so, just like I'm holding enter on the make paperclip button, I'll also be holding enter on the compute button. And with one photonic chip, I have been very consistently able to get 5,000 more operations over my cap, but not a whole lot past that. So we just got the photonic chip. Now we're waiting for those 15 seconds for the cycle. And in the meantime, I'm going to get improved auto clippers because it's a cheap research. I can get it just a little bit earlier by doing it, and I'll get Rev Tracker as well, just because I'm not going to be able to afford anything else before the cycle. So here's the photonic chip cycle. You can see I'm going back and forth, clicking on compute while holding enter, getting a research, and so on. And then at this point, we're unlocking what is going to be the major luck-based part of the first phase, which is the stock investment engine. And we're not going to be doing anything with it yet, but throughout the first phase of the game, and if you're not familiar with the phases of the game, just keep watching and you'll see. We need, in the first phase of the game, we need a lot of money, and the best way to make the money turns out to be the stock market. So here we have this thing in the bottom right, which is the strategic modeling, which gives us a resource called Yomi, which is sort of the idea of being able to read like opponents in strategy games and so on. And in this case, it refers to being able to read the stock market. So Yomi is the resource you use to improve your stock investment returns, and so on. And it's also just required for various researches. And at the same time, I'm trying to get to 75 auto clippers. So this is why I said it would have been reasonable to stockpile some inventory earlier to try to get 75 auto clippers faster. And at 75 auto clippers, there will be a research unlocked, which unlocks mega clippers, which are 500 times more powerful than a standard auto clipper, as you can see right there. And those are, of course, very, very strong. So we're going to stay at 75 auto clippers for the remainder of the first phase. And everything else will be done via mega clippers. So here we go. We're going to go research the mega clippers. Now I'm going to take a bit of time here to just clarify. I don't think that this run is perfect by any means. This is this is a pretty good patch 2 run, I feel, but I definitely feel like it's improvable. You'll see various places where I make small mistakes, and I might point some of those out. And my stock market luck was not the best. So if I had to guess, I would say definitely more than a minute could be saved off of this. Probably more like 2 or 3, maybe 4. It's really hard to say with games like this. One of the hardest things is that phases 2 and 3, it's just very unclear or like because it's in 3 phases, it's very, but you keep some of your resources. It's very unclear how many resources you have in one phase going into the next affects how long the next phase takes. So to me, it feels like phase 1 pretty much determines the run, and phase 2 and 3 pretty much always take the same amount of time together. But it could be wrong, and there's definitely going to be more routing improvements in the future. So at this point in phase 1, or at this point I've got 3,000 Yomi, and you can see this research coherent extrapolated volition, which is sort of the next step in phase 1, and that will unlock a lot of what we call trust quests, where again, it's very similar to the early creativity ones, where they just give you more trust. And actually, these have a slightly hidden, a somewhat hidden side effect as well, which is that they increase your stock market returns in addition to giving you additional trust. And in order to get that, I need to have 500 creativity. So at this point, I have the 3,000 Yomi that I need. I will need more Yomi afterward, so I'm still trying to get Yomi, but I want to be at max operations pretty much as possible at this point to get that 500 creativity very quickly. So I am not supposed to be making new tournaments to get Yomi at this point, because those cost operations bring me below the operations cap, preventing me from getting creativity. And you'll see me make some tournaments when I'm not supposed to. It looks like here I'm okay, but yeah. And also, once again, you'll notice that I'm holding steady with how many Mega Clippers I have. I have 14 Mega Clippers, keeping it at 4 cents per paperclip. I just went down to 3 cents because I noticed I was running a massive surplus. Here I'm basically stockpiling paperclips because once I get later in phase 1, I'll be able to sell those off for a very high price. So here you can see one technique to make Yomi and creativity at the same time, which is to use quantum computing to always be above the operations cap while making the Yomi tournaments. Now, it's also worth pointing out that I can research a strategy A100, which increases the length of the Yomi tournaments, and it also increases the Yomi gains, but it actually doesn't pay off right now, because the way that the Yomi tournaments work is that every strategy plays every other strategy. Like, every strategy plays as player 1 and player 2. So if you have n strategies unlocked, you have n squared rounds. So with one strategy, you just play 1 round. With 2 strategies, you play 4 rounds. With 3 strategies, you play 3 rounds. And up to 8 strategies when you're going to play 64 rounds. And the reward is the total number of points that your strategy acquired times the number of strategies that it did better than. But that multiplier is has a minimum of 1, so that you can get Yomi even if you get dead last. What that means, though, is that if you have just one strategy, you're always going to have a multiplier of 1. And if you have 2 strategies, you're also going to have a multiplier of 1. But you're only going to be getting about twice as many points because you'll play against yourself and you'll play against your opponent. So you're going to get about twice as much Yomi, but there's 4 rounds instead of just 1 round. So the tournament takes 4 times as long, and that's not going to be worth it. So at this point, I've gotten the coherent extrapolated volition, and we've got several trust quests that only require operations. So the first one is at 20,000 operations, and we'll use quantum computing to get that. Get some memory to get more. So you're going to cure male pattern baldness, then cure cancer, and then I believe solving global warming is the next one. But we need more. Okay, we have enough Yomi for global warming, and then we're going to need more Yomi for world peace. So at this point, we're going to be funneling into processors. We don't need any more memory at this point for a while. Eventually, we're going to want to exit phase 1 with 75 memory, but we're going to go up to 25 processors in the meantime in order to maximize our creativity gains. Now, at this point, you'll also notice I am using a bit of a menuing technique, I guess, where after clicking run on a Yomi tournament, when I'm ready to run the next tournament, I can just hit tab and space to move focus over to the new tournament button and then hit it. That reduces the amount of mouse movements, makes it much easier. At this point, I'm going to be getting all of the remaining 8 strategies for Yomi tournaments. It's my experience in patch 2 that I get even without any additional benefits, I get more Yomi gains like over time with all 8 strategies unlocked than with just random unlocked. And in order to capitalize on that, I do have a Yomi helper, which I'll link in the description of the video, that basically runs the tournament a whole bunch of times and tells you the expected Yomi gains for each one. And with the modifiers that you can have later on, like those are options in the Yomi helper. So this is super useful for the whole run. And and I need a lot of Yomi here because I need to upgrade my investment engine a lot. The stock market doesn't actually pay off really until you get at least investment level 4, and at that point it pays off very slowly. As you get higher and higher levels, it starts paying off quicker and more reliably. And I'm actually going to be going all the way up to level 8 for this run. I've been thinking maybe I need to even go to level 9, but I'm not sure because there are some pretty significant Yomi requirements down, like after phase 1, that you kind of want to save Yomi for. But at this point, we're going to be saving up our money. We need $1 million for a hostile takeover. The research isn't actually unlocked yet because the requirement for unlocking that is just putting any money in the stock market. I think I'm going to just deposit and quickly withdraw in a little bit, but I don't have $1 million yet. I'm just holding out until I can invest profitably in the stock market. And I'm also looking to get world peace. So like I said, world peace is one of those quests that will also increase the gains of the stock market. And so it's worth getting. It's kind of an interesting position here, though, because 15,000 Yomi is a lot. It's possible that I could actually... I wonder if it would pay off to get to start investing before getting world peace. There's definitely still lots of potential. It looks like if you can get level 5 investment, so world peace basically is worth 1 investment level, and so if you could get it would make sense actually to not get world peace until the Yomi cost is over 15,000, which eventually it does. But at the same time, world peace does allow you to get to those 25 processors and start maximizing the creativity gains. Now, my goal for phase 1 is to exit with 20,000 creativity, and this is not very easy, to be quite honest. Because we need to be generating a lot of Yomi in addition, Yomi... starting a tournament costs operations, and so we need to be careful about and whenever we're not at the operations cap, we're going to be not generating creativity. So here, it's pretty much just always worth it to get to just keep running Yomi tournaments because the stock market is the most important thing right now, even more important than creativity. Of course, creativity is super important, but getting to the hostile takeover is very... that's basically unlocks a lot of monetary potential, because when you get the takeover, you're basically the idea is you're taking over one of your paperclip competitors. And so you can start now. You can sell your paper clips for a huge amount more money, and you just make money significantly faster, and so on. So, yeah. So the way that the investment engine actually works is that the levels increase what's called the stock gain threshold, which is essentially the probability that a stock will go up rather than down. So periodically the game decides, okay, this stock is going to change, and this is how much it's going to change by. Now should it go up or should it go down? And you know, if you have a higher level, it'll go up more often than it'll go down. And overall, it starts paying off at around level 4 if you have all the trust quests. It would be level 5 if we had skipped world peace at this point. But it's not going to be paying off a whole lot. But at the same time, it's going to be paying off more than spending money on, you know, mega clippers and so on, and marketing, because we'd have to spend, you know, $100,000 on marketing, and well, how long does it take to get $100,000 back? It actually takes a really long time. Now, unfortunately, you can see my lifetime investment revenue report, negative $17,689. I did not have the best of luck for the first section, but here we are now, being at about $250,000. We need another factor of 4, which, yeah, I mean, this wasn't the best phase 1 for sure. I ended up getting decent luck, but not godlike luck, and definitely with some more attempts, you could grind out for much better luck than this. But one good thing did happen, which is that when I actually got the takeover, the stock market had actually given me about $1.5 million instead of just $1 million, because you can't withdraw at any given time. You need to wait for your investment engine to decide to get money out of stocks into cash, and then you can withdraw the cash. And when I had that opportunity, I actually had like about $1.5 million, so I got to put it back in and start generating money toward the full monopoly, which is the next part of phase 1, which requires $10 million, and that was really nice. So at this point, we're pretty much just hoping that the stock market is nice to us. Of course, it doesn't. One thing I want to point out is that with a 64-round tournament, each round is about 1 second long. And remember that a quantum computing cycle is about 63 seconds long. So actually, if you synchronize starting a tournament with the quantum computing cycle, it'll stay roughly synced for several cycles, and you can, as a result, you can be generating Yomi and creativity at the same time, very nicely that way. And I'll do that later on in the run. Right now, I'm focused solely on getting more Yomi so that I can improve my investment engine. And you can see I was a little bit unlucky. So there is also there's randomness in how the Yomi tournament gets generated, and some tournaments will be more profitable than others. And you can see I fell 84 Yomi short of investment level 6. So that was a little bit unfortunate. And some other unfortunate things that happen is later on, like at the very end of phase 1, when I need to get my money out of the stock market, I'm waiting for like a minute where I have enough money in stocks. I just need to be I just need the investment engine to sell it, and then I can take it out, and it just doesn't happen for like a full minute. It's very unfortunate. But yeah, so we're getting close. We should be getting there in a little bit. So you can see here, at this point I have enough money, but once again, I can't just withdraw. I have to wait for the investment engine to actually decide to withdraw. And it does fluctuate. So sometimes you are starting to withdraw. Oh, actually, I was mistaken. I was thinking of the Monopoly stage where I had like 14 million. This stage I didn't have excess. But at this point, I'm investing in Mega Clippers again because I'm just making money so quickly here that it's worth it to invest in the paperclip business a little bit, and then a little bit after that, then go put things back in the stock market. Actually, now that I'm watching this run back, I'm wondering if it's not actually worth it, because I don't need significant mega clippers until I'm actually... So the actual paperclip count doesn't really matter from here until the very end of phase 1. And I wonder if just having like $1 million in the investment engine would be worth it. Like maybe go until I have like $2 million in the stock market, and then only like pull out $1 million, spend $1 million on the takeover, and then leave $1 million in. Maybe that would allow the monopoly split to be faster overall. Because as you can see here, I was starting out with like $100,000 in the stock market, and that means that I'm not really making money very quickly because I just don't have a whole lot of money to invest in the first place. Stock market returns are basically multiplicative on your money. Like you get a basically the same percent of your investment back over time, at least on average. And so if you have more money in the stock market, you of course make a lot more money. And having like decreasing the amount of investments by a factor of 10 is pretty significant. So that might be something to try. And you'll notice that I actually made a bit of an error. I was selling my paperclips for a little bit too low of a price for a while there, just making less money than I could have. But at the same time, it's going to still be mostly based on luck from here. Some of you might be wondering also why I haven't researched a second photonic chip, and that's because each photonic chip has a slightly different period, and when you have two things with differing periods, they'll sometimes be both on, and then sometimes one will be on and one will be off, and then both will be off, and then both will be on again, and so on. And the periods where one is on and one is off aren't very profitable operations-wise. And what happens when you get multiple chips is that when you do have everything on, it's sort of more powerful. You can generate operations faster, but that both lasts less time and they come rarer. So by having just the one photonic chip, we can get very consistent quantum computing cycles and have them happen pretty often, like again every 63 seconds. So pretty much every minute you will get one, instead of sometimes getting one, sometimes not, and that ends up being much more comfortable for the full run. So at this point, I have finally gotten back above $1 million. I'm definitely thinking maybe it would be better to keep the money in the stock market for a little bit. Get a little bit, at least a little bit more, maybe like $1.5 million, maybe $2 million, something like that. Yeah. I think for a really good run, you're going to be aiming for a Hypnodrone release time of around 52 minutes, maybe even 51 or 50, depending on how much route improvement we can find. And again, I don't think that phases 2 and 3 will change too much, so I think that that's, why I say you can save probably around 2 to 4 minutes. Like, at least, definitely more than 1, but probably like 2 to 4 minutes overall, even without like significant route improvements. So at this point, I am waiting for $10 million in the stock market, and again, I'm actually it's going to turn out that I'm going to get to around 14 million, which is going to give me a good head start. And this was in this run, I actually had the best final phase 1 split that I've ever had, and I think part of that was because I had that excess money going into it. So, as you can see, I'm trying to generate Yomi, but also generate creativity at all times. And here I'm coming up on 10,000 creativity. So I'm feeling pretty good about where my creativity is going to be. Once again, I want to be above 20,000 going into phase 2. Finally get investment level 8, and you can see that the Yomi costs are getting pretty high. So a typical Yomi tournament, you get, maybe like 5,000 Yomi. 40,000 Yomi is going to take, 8 minutes to generate, since each tournament takes like around a minute, a bit over a minute. 8 minutes is a lot of time. So I'm not going to get level 9, but it's definitely a consideration, because while you do need the Yomi, you've got a bit of time in phase 2. I think, looking at it, I think it's not worth it, and I think that just like maybe better money management or something is going to be the key to getting faster phase 1s. But yeah. And here I am trying to synchronize my tournaments with the quantum computing, so we're about halfway, or about a quarter of the way through the cycle here, so pretty much it's full black. Halfway through is when it starts being white. And if you use quantum computing during the white half of the cycle, it actually takes away your operation, so you definitely don't want to do that. But there I was able to start a tournament while also maintaining max operations. Like, I just went below max operations for a little bit, used quantum computing to get back up, and right there. So this is good overall. And I'm just leaving my paperclip business as is and just funneling money into the stock market. Again, holding off on improving memory, because that would make it so my operations were no longer capped. So I want to have a favorable quantum computing cycle so I can get back to the ops cap right away whenever I upgrade my memory. And we're going in, so even though you only need 70,000 operations for phase 1, which means that we could actually exit phase 1 with as little as 65 memory, or even less if we were really greedy on the quantum computing. What I like to call it quantum tunneling. You're like tunneling through the barrier. It's not actually very similar to actual quantum tunneling, but whatever. But some of the researches in phase 2 require 80,000 operations very early in phase 2, and you don't have time to upgrade your computational resources before those. So I get 75 memory so that I can use quantum computing to research those 80,000 operations ones. And so here we go. We're at $10 million in the stock market, and as I'm pulling it out and waiting for the stocks to withdraw, the money goes up even past that, which is just favorable luck. But I think that's actually something that maybe is worth waiting for. Maybe not on the monopoly split, because from the monopoly split now we actually do care about how many mega clippers we have, because we're going to use a combination of paperclips and money in order to get to 100 trust. Now, at the beginning of phase 2, you need 100 million paperclips, and the game actually now doesn't allow you to buy trust until you have 100 million paperclips. That was a patch change because people are getting soft locked. So the trust levels around 100 million are, the one right before is at 89 million, and the one right after is at 121 million. And then the one after that is at 196 million. And so what I tend to do is that I try to coordinate the right amount of money, which is going to be about $500 million, so $500 million, with getting to that 121 million paperclip mark. And in doing so, we can get that lines us up exactly at 100 trust to start phase 2. And so mainly right now, I'm focused on getting enough mega clippers so that I will have 121 million paper clips at around 54 minutes. Like I knew I was behind at the Monopoly split, and so I figured, okay, 54 minutes would be like where I would be if I had some good stock market luck. So let's aim for 54 minutes. So I'm thinking, okay, well, I have, like 9 minutes or 8.5 minutes from here. How many clips per second do I need in order to make the remaining 60 million paper clips in those 8.5 minutes? And so I'm just kind of estimating that in my mind. I'm thinking, okay, well, I probably need like 125. I'll need like 125,000 paper clips per second, maybe a bit more than that. So I'm just getting my mega clippers up, getting my marketing up a little bit, but getting my mega clippers up so that I can start getting that amount, having that amount of paper clips. And you'll notice that mega clippers start costing a huge amount of money. So it's not really worth getting. Like, at some point it stops being worth it to buy mega clippers. Like, when you're buying one mega clipper for like $1 million, it's really painful, even though, you kind of need it just for the ability to get enough paper clips. But as it turns out, I was actually blocked on withdrawing money from the stock market in this run, which was amusing. And one of the first times that's actually happened for me. So again, we're at 14,500 creativity. I think that we're on very good pace to have 20,000 creativity going into phase 2. Yeah, I guess now is a good time to talk about what the patch changes have been. So back in patch 0, so before any patches, the game was actually had a really fun speed strat where in phase 3, there's a research called strategic attachment that gives you bonus Yomi for picking the winner of the tournament. And in patch 0, this wasn't gated behind anything other than being in phase 3. So if you just never researched any strategies other than random for the whole game, for all of phases 1 and 2, when you hit phase 3, you could get that strategic attachment, and then you would just make these very short one-round tournaments that only have one strategy. You would always pick the winner properly because there's only one choice, and you would just get a huge amount of Yomi, and it allowed us to basically be unlimited on Yomi for the entirety of phase 3. Now that got patched in patch 1, and so one of the requirements to get that strategic attachment is actually having all 8 strategies unlocked at this point. And in patch 1 it was still worth it to stay on random up until the point where you got strategic attachment, because the way that the Yomi gains worked was it was just the total number of points that your strategy got. And so remember that I mentioned earlier, now it's the number of points your strategy gets times the number of strategies that you beat. So if you pick the winner in the current patch, then you get, you'll have like 8 times more points due to there being 8 opponents to play, and then you'll have a multiplier of 7 because of beating 7 other strategies, and that gives you a pretty good multiplier to counteract the fact that this tournament takes 64 times longer. And also the fact that, because there's sort of human delay in starting a new tournament, it's not actually a full 64 times longer, and I think that's partly why I find that I get more Yomi actually by having all 8 strategies unlocked now. It also allows me to multitask a lot easier. It's just a lot... it feels a lot better as well, and so on. But in patch 1, you didn't have that 7x multiplier. So you basically just were always going to have the best Yomi returns by just having random unlocked, up until the point when you needed to unlock strategic attachment, and then I did make the Yomi helper And at that point, I was just assumed you had strategic attachment, because if you didn't have it, why did you have any strategies other than random unlocked, right? So that the patches have actually changed quite a bit. The other major patch change going into patch 2 is that phase 2 is significantly faster. Now, this doesn't actually change the length of the overall speedrun that much, because when phase 2 is a lot faster, you actually just have way less time to generate resources for phase 3. And as a result, your phase 3 slows down considerably. So they kind of cancel each other out. And I'll point that out a bit more when we get there. So you can see I've got $185 million in the stock market right now. We're looking for 511 million. Actually more like 512 million. And we're looking for that 121 million paperclip mark. And I've got all the mega clippers I need set up, and so on. So at this point, it's just waiting and hoping that we get good luck on the stock market. Now, there's a lot of different things that have impact. Like, there's a lot of randomness in the stock market. There's randomness in how expensive the stocks are. So you can only have 1 million of a single type of stock, and you see that currently a lot of my stocks are maxed out, and the price is random. So you want to get higher stocks because you always want to be fully invested. Being fully invested is how you get the best returns, but you don't have any control over that. So you're just kind of hoping that you roll high prices. If you roll low prices, that really sucks. Again, it basically flips coins whether the stock is going to go up or down. You know, they're slightly weighted in your favor, but they're only weighted by around it's like 0.62 to go up and 0.38 to go down. So you can still lose a lot of money at the same time as you're making money. So there, we just researched hypnodrones, and because we were... Actually, that was poorly timed. Yeah, so that was poorly timed because I wasn't at a good quantum cycle. But I'm already at 19,797 creativity. It's probably okay. I'm going to have 20,000 creativity going into phase 2 for sure. And I do have a few minutes at the start of phase 2 before actually researching momentum, which is the research that requires it. So yeah. And you can see... Oh yeah, so I also want to point out that the Yomi tournament mechanics are actually kind of weird in that the way that ties are handled, actually earlier strategies, so like random, like the strategies are in order, random, A100, B100, and so on. And so the earlier strategies are actually favored in the tiebreaker. So here I've got enough money in the stock market, and I just need to pull it out at this point. And I'm trying to get it out, but it's gonna take like a full another minute. And you can see I hit the paperclip threshold right there. If I could just pull out the stock market, I would have like a 53-minute phase 1 exit. But alas, we are stuck. Our money is stuck in stocks. We're waiting for it to be sold off. And then also, unfortunately, is the money is in several different stocks, so we had to, it has to sell off several. But yeah, so as I was saying, earlier strategies are favored for ties. So if, for example, all the payoffs were the same, every strategy would tie, which would mean that random actually would pay off the most Yomi, because random would get a multiplier of 7, A100 would get a multiplier of 6, B100 would get a multiplier of 5, and so on down to beat last, which would be in last, and only get a multiplier of 1. So the Yomi helper does account for that, and it will generally tell you to pick earlier strats rather than later strats. And in addition to that, there's also a weird feature of the Yomi tournaments that where some of the strategies depend on their opponent's last move, but on the first turn of a game, they use the last move that was done by like the opposing player with a different strategy, and so the ordering in which things get played, in which rounds get played, actually affects the results. Now it is time to release the hypno drones. So we got the humans to trust us, and we are now. So they trusted us enough and gave us access to these hypnodrones, and we released the hypnodrones. So now all the humans are hypnotized. We are in control of the Earth, and it is now our duty to transform the Earth into paperclips. So this is phase 2, and the mechanics for phase 2 are very different from phase 1. You'll notice that we don't have any money. I mean, we're in control of the whole world economy. We don't need money anymore. We can just have humans start bidding. And we need to research these drones. So we're making drones, which will produce wire and harvest matter, and then also clip factories, which will turn the wire into paper clips. And at this point, we need to manage the power supplies for these various things, and we'll be upgrading them over time. So the first thing to do, really, is to get momentum, which is a research that speeds up factories and drones as long as they are fully powered. And the requirement for unlocking that research is to have 30 solar farms. Excuse me. So at this point, we're going to be just building up clip production and building out solar farms and trying to get to 30 of them. And then once we're, and also, yeah, so we'll get the swarm, so we have swarm computing, which is basically the phase 2 replacement for trust. So swarm computing is how we get more computational resources at this point. So our goal here is to get 30 solar farms, and I should have had the drones at full work the whole time, but I wasn't thinking about it properly. There's momentum. And you'll see that the drone performance goes up very rapidly here. So from this point onward, we're going to be careful not to drop momentum, meaning we need to make sure that there's always power supply to our drones and factories. Now, the battery towers do help a little bit with that, but at certain stages of phase 2, it's very, very easy to just completely blow past your power production and eliminate all of your storage in a matter of like 1 second or something. And so I'm being pretty careful to avoid that. The next thing that we need is we need to get to 10 factories and 500 drones, and each of those has an 80,000 operations research to improve. So when you get 10 factories, you can improve your factory performance. When you get 500 drones, you can improve your drone performance. Both of those researches cost 80,000 operations. We want to get the drone one first, because by having the drones, by having drone performance, we can move our drones over to thinking and acquire more computational resources. And we need a lot of creativity. So we needed 20,000 creativity going into phase 2. We also want to have another 25,000 creativity as soon as we can. And then we're going to need hundreds of thousands of creativity after that. But throughout the rest of the game, we're going to be getting a lot more processors than we have. Like right now, we only have 25 because we need that memory. But later in the game, we're not going to need nearly as much memory, and so we'll be able to get a lot more processors. So here, I'll get the drone flocking. And the drone flocking means that I can move my drones over to think, and so I tend to move it all the way to think, except with like 1 tick over to work, so they're still making some amount of wire. And then now we can make clip factories, and we're pretty much just making clip factories up until we have 10, and then get the 80,000 operations research to improve our factory performance. And in the meantime, and as always, we're being careful about our power production and so on. So the swarm gifts, they give you get more computational resources if you have more drones. So later in phase 2, we're going to be mainly getting drones just for that purpose, just to get larger swarm gifts. And I don't know exactly where like the break-even point is between, you know, the fact that, okay, well, we get larger gifts, but we're spending a lot of clips on solar farms and drones that could be spent on clip factories, getting out of phase 2 faster. It's really hard to tell. Like, there's so many options for routing in this game that just there's sort of like this negative feedback where you make a change and maybe it gets you out of phase 2 faster, but phase 3 slows down by almost as much, maybe even more, and it's really hard to tell exactly how much phase 3 slowed down by because of that change. So you'll notice I got more memory. This is because there is an 85,000 operations research and a 100,000 operations research that is coming up soon. And those are both very important as well. So now we're about to get the 10 factories, which will allow us to get that 80,000 ops research. And I should be using quantum computing to get back up. It looks like I'm slacking on it a little bit. But yeah. Oh, right, because I need to... Right, because at this point, like, actually increasing the drone count and factory count is maybe even more important than creativity. It's hard to tell exactly what is the most important thing to prioritize. So, unfortunately, we're not making creativity for now. I think maybe that was a mistake. Maybe I should have focused on the quantum computing and then dealt with the factories and drones while the quantum computing cycle was off. But we're looking to get to 20 factories and so on. And at this point, I have the slider kind of in the middle because if it's all the way toward think, you can just get you're only sacrificing a little bit of think, relatively, like percentage-wise, by moving it over to work, but you're like multiplying your work by a factor of 10 or something. So somewhere in the middle is going to I feel is generally going to be best. Again, I don't have any like real testing. It's hard to test these things or to make like mathematical models or so on. Like, it's really hard to decide what exactly is all of those input, what all of those means. But here I'm going to shift toward things because I need to get more swarm gifts in order to get to the memory requirements so that I can have 100,000 ops to get the new drone flocking. It's really important to get the drone flocking once again because that will allow me to have my drones pretty much all the way on think, get swarm gifts pretty often, and so on. And at this point, I don't need any more factories because, they're already consuming all of the wire that the drones are making. So basically, right now the quantum right now we've got the next gift in 50 seconds or so. The quantum cycle just ended, which means it'll start again in about 30 seconds. So it looks like I'll be a little bit late. I don't remember if I get the alignment on this one, but I think I move my slider all the way over to think here just to try to speed it up a little bit. Move it back, change my mind. But yeah, here you can see it looks like I'm going to be just a little bit late, which is unfortunate. We'll see how it goes. Like, I think in theory it might be possible to actually get 8,000 above your operations cap, but it's pretty hard and not reliable to do. Especially not with one photonic chip. I think 5,000 or 6,000 is pretty much the cap. So that's really unfortunate that the swarm gift didn't line up with the quantum computing how I wanted it to. So now I have to wait all the way for the next quantum cycle, and to like add insult to injury, I have 99 memory, so I actually need that quantum computing cycle in order to get the operation, to get past the operations cap. If I had 100 memory, I would probably have just hit 100,000 operations naturally before the quantum cycle and been fine that way. But all the while making more drones and everything. Actually, it looks like I would I would be waiting for the quantum cycle anyway. But here's the quantum cycle. Now we're gonna get that 100,000 for the alignment, and I do need to get the quantum computing back up. I'm focusing on drones because I felt like that was more important, but honestly, I think the creativity going into phase 3 might actually be more important. So maybe when I do more runs, I'll try to focus getting my operations back to the cap again. And at this point, the drones work extremely quickly, which means that we're actually going to run out of matter on Earth kind of soon. And it's important to be careful because if there's no available matter, then your drones will eventually get bored, and it costs creativity to entertain them. So that's like a disaster because creativity is the most limiting resource for the final stages of the game. And, losing some creativity just because you ran out of matter is bad. So what you'll see is that I'm going to move my drones to full think. So I'm going to move them over to work for now. And then this will happen a little bit later. So right now we're looking for the 1 sextillion clips, which is a research that just dramatically improves our factory performance. You can see each factory added to the network increases every factory's output by increases the performance by 1,000. So now we've got basically all the paperclips we could ever ask for, and we can just add more drones and so on, and more factories and so on. And this is the stage where it's super easy to accidentally drop momentum. So I'm being quite cautious here. And what you'll notice is that the drones harvest matter very quickly once I get over 100,000 of them. So you can see that 4.3, 4.2, that the available matter is ticking down quite fast. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the available matter down to just under 1 octillion, and then disassemble all my harvester drones to use up all of my acquired matter. Now, I don't want to be in this stage for too long, because if your harvester drones and wire drones are unbalanced, then the swarm will get disorganized, which also takes... I forget if it's creativity or ops in this case to reorganize them. It's been a long time since I've let my swarm get disorganized. But you don't want that to happen either, because you stop getting swarm gifts until you pay them off. So at this point, now my drones are on full think, so I'm just getting more drones to increase the size of swarm gifts. And you'll notice that I have a non-zero amount of available matter, which prevents them from getting bored, even though they're not doing any work with that matter. And that's really, really useful to save the creativity. So at this point, we're pretty much just looking to exit phase 2 now. So the requirement to start phase 3 is, you unlock the research when you've harvested all of the matter on Earth. But again, I don't want to harvest the matter because that would allow my drones to get bored. So the actual cost for the research is 5 octillion unused paperclips. So I need to get 5 octillion paperclips, and then I'll tick my drones over to work real quick to get to consume the rest of the matter, unlock the research, and then be able to move on to phase 3, which is space exploration. And in the meantime, we're still making Yomi. Yomi's very important for phase 3, and I'll explain why when that happens. And creativity is also important. We would like to get theory of mind as fast as possible because that improves our Yomi production. Yomi is very important. Strategic attachment, which is the research that I mentioned earlier that gives you a bonus for picking the winner of a tournament or the second place or third place finisher. That costs 175,000 creativity. We would love to be able to have 175,000 creativity, but that's just not really feasible in patch 2. And it doesn't seem to be worth it to stall in phase 2. So back in patch 1, phase 2 was probably like 15 minutes longer. And so having that 175,000 creativity was actually feasible because it turns out that you generate a lot of creativity over the course of 15 minutes. But it doesn't appear to be worth it to sort of sit around in phase 2. It's just going to be more worth it to start up phase 3 kind of weaker, and then, you'll eventually catch up, but you'll have a head start of where you would be if you did that in phase 2. So all we are doing now is, putting our swarm gifts. We did put our swarm gifts up to 123 memory. I think I'm going to actually get that all the way up to 125 for elliptic hull prototypes, which is an important research at near the start of phase 3. And the rest all in processors to maximize creativity gains. It does seem like I probably lost a few thousand creativity from not quantum computing quite as aggressively as you could have. And you'll notice here that I'm holding my memory. I am being conscious of it now, at least, where I'm holding my memory until the quantum computing cycle so that I am producing creativity the whole way instead of spending processor time on those 2,000 operations. So, get 125,000 ops and then bring up the memory and so on. So creativity is still going. And all we're waiting for is to have 5 octillion paperclips. Actually a little bit more because I personally don't disassemble my solar farms. You do need battery power, but you don't need the actual solar farms to start space exploration. So you could disassemble the solar farms, but I just don't because it only takes like a few seconds to get a buffer where you don't need to. And it's a little bit weird to try to figure out exactly how many paperclips you need. I guess that's something that, someone could figure out, okay, this is exactly how much more paperclips I need than 5 octillion in order to have enough disassembling everything. But yeah, in particular, you can't disassemble right at 5 million or 5 octillion because you do need some paperclips invested in battery towers. And here I'm like considering, okay, should I wait for this next swarm gift? But I end up deciding not to, I believe. So yeah, so I've got the 5 octillion just from factories even. And yeah. There it is. Now we're in space. So in space, we still have sort of the same idea of having factories and drones, but in addition to that, we have these probes, which are probes that we sort of send out into space, and they can self-replicate, so they make more probes, they can explore space, they can generate drones, they can generate factories. And the key here is that we're just going to want to generate as many probes as we can. And, probes do multiply exponential, like the growth rate is going to be exponential for once. And actually most of the earlier stuff was more like quadratic or cubic. I think most earlier research is like capped out at quadratic or cubic or something. This is like the one actual exponential growth feature of the game. But at the same time, you have damping factors. So probes can be lost to hazards, they can be lost to value drift, which is they sort of question, well, are we really supposed to be maximizing the total number of paperclips? Is this really what our values are? Maybe we value life or something. and eventually the drifters, as they're called, will start attacking and start killing your probes. So that's so those are the damping factors, and those will prevent you from really growing as fast as you would like. And the way that each of the probes has some number of points that you can allocate, or like you can allocate points between them. All the probes actually act identically. It's just like a function of the probe count, basically. And you generate, this is probe trust, so you need to get probes to trust you, and you do that by spending Yomi. And this is why Yomi is so important for the final stage of the game. So at this point, I finally have the ability to, I'm making a few drones just to get swarm gifts. I don't need to have them working at all because I've got a huge amount of leftover clips from consuming Earth, and it's not really important to, I don't need more than, my production is so minuscule compared to my stockpile at this point. Until the probe count gets into at least the millions or maybe even billions or so. But so here now, creativity still matters, but Yomi matters more. Up until 20 probe trust, all we care about is Yomi. After that, we're going to need to get more. There's going to be a new resource called Honor, which is basically like how well you do in the war against the drifters, the non-believers in the paperclips, and you will need a lot of honor in order to increase the max trust. So currently, I can only increase probe trust up to 20, and then I need honor in order to get it up to past that. And the best way to get honor is going to be through creativity. So creativity is so important, but Yomi is more important right now because all we care about really is the total number of probes that we have, and our goal is to get that up by several orders of magnitude. You'll notice that I've manually launched close to 4,000 probes. That's once again just holding the enter button to launch 30 per second. Very convenient there. At this point, the self-replication really outpaces anything I can do manually, so I kind of do it for fun and whatever, but yeah. And again, increasing the drone population is really just for increasing the size of swarm gifts, so I can get more processors, so I can get more creativity, so that I can get honor and Yomi faster. It went by really quick, but I did get the elliptic hull prototypes a while back that decreases the number of probes that you lose to hazards. And once you have elliptic hull prototypes, it's optimal to hold hazard remediation at 5. This actually holds regardless of how many points you're putting in self-replication, which is pretty interesting. In that, 8 points of self-replication, 5 points of hazard remediation is the best spread of 13 points between the two stats. And so, typically you're going to have some number of stats that you want other places, and then everything else wants to be in those two to just maximize your probe gain. So pretty much every time I am able to increase probe trust, I will just put the new point in self-replication. Closing in on 1 million probes here. And at that point, I'm going to, increase my... I'm going to consider increasing my drone count. It's actually not really worth it here. I should probably just be leaving these points in self-replication. And I go back. Basically, I want to increase my drone count when I can increase it by an order of magnitude quite quickly. Otherwise, I want to be increasing my probe count because that will allow me to, I'll make more probes, and then the more probes will generate drones faster, and so on. So we're losing quite a few probes to value drift now, and momentarily we should see combat start. When does that start? I think it starts when you lose like 1 million probes to value drift. But the combat's actually quite unfortunate because the drifters just kind of kill your probes, and then you need to get combat and then put points in combat so that they don't kill your probes too quickly. And it's a giant pain. But yeah. Almost at 10 million probes now. There we go. So now we've got this combat, and you can see we've got the combat research, which allows us to give our probes combat capabilities to fight back against the drifters. Now the thing is that in order to really have combat have a significant effect, you need to invest like 5 or 6 points in it. So it really kind of sucks until the drifters really become populous, because that's 5 or 6 points that isn't going into self-replication. So as long as like you're not losing too many probes to combat, it's like, okay, it's probably better to leave the points in self-replication. But once you start losing lots and lots of probes, and if you're not careful, the drifters can actually start outnumbering your probes, and then it becomes a really big pain. It is possible to recover from it, but you have to put like a huge number of points into combat just to make sure that your probes always survive. So I'm still not getting, like, I don't even have the 150,000 operations. Like, I don't have enough memory to get that. But pretty soon with the swarm gifts, I will go ahead and get that up so that I can keep the drifter count down. And once again, there you saw me put speed and exploration up to 1 for just a second, so that I would have available matter so that my drones never get bored. That's just a nice little trick so that I don't lose creativity. But it looks like I am starting to lose quite a few probes to combat, so I think that at this point it's going to be worthwhile to start getting more memory. And yeah, so I was just making sure I had a quantum cycle to get that memory. And then we'll get combat and start keeping the drifter count down. Alright, so combat is researched, but it's a little bit awkward. One thing to note is that if you look at the combat window, you can notice that my probe is just kind of running around and not getting hit by a drifter. And while that's happening, I'm not losing any probes in combat. So there's no need to have combat points while things like this is happening in the combat window. Eventually the combat will just kind of end and start a new one, and then you'll lose a whole bunch of probes at the start. But with good micro, you can actually switch back and forth between combat and self-replication, get more probe gain than you would otherwise. So I think a new combat will start soon, and then I'll probably shift over like 5 points to combat. And I think for this run I typically kept like 5 or 6 points in combat for most of it, in order to keep the drifter population down. Like, in addition to just being able to kill the drifters instead of being killed by the drifters, by having lower drifter populations, they kill fewer of your probes at a time. They just kill probes slower, and so even without the combat points, you lose less. So you can sort of go back and forth between combat and self-replication, and so on. Now, you'll notice that I still have 0.00000000000% of the universe explored, and that's because the universe is really big. Nothing is broken. Lots of people wonder, like, why have I not explored any of the universe? The universe is really big. So here you'll see I just lost a whole bunch of probes. I should be shifting points over to combat soon so that I lose less probes. But yeah, I think once your losses to combat are like roughly equal to your losses and hazards, you need like that. That's a sign you really need to be putting points in combat. So I'm a little bit slow here on that, but trying to deal with my quantum computing. But I think I'll get it in a little bit. Lost so many probes to combat. There we go. Here we go. Alright, so here I'm learning that 3 is not enough, and then I'm like, okay, maybe 5 is enough, let's go. And I noticed that the drifter population is actually really high, so I'm like, okay, let's go to 6. That means that I'm actually killing the drifters instead of being killed by the drifters mostly, and that keeps their population down a lot. Try to oscillate between combat and self-replication a little bit, but yeah, honestly, it's probably best to just keep 6 in combat the whole way. Based on my experiences in this run, I think that's just kind of the way to go. Keeps the drifter population down to like maybe 1% of the probe population, and that allows your probes to still grow comfortably. So you'll also notice that I'm not researching auto-tourney, and you can probably figure out why based on what I've said so far. The cost of auto-tourney is 50,000 creativity, and all it does is like automate something that costs a couple clicks every now and then. 50,000 creativity is a lot of creativity. We can't afford that. So we're closing in on we're getting close-ish to having 20 probe trust. I mean, we're at 17, and I mean, still a long way to go. So back in patch 0, because of the slower phase 2 and the fact that you just had so much Yomi, you could actually like get to 40 probe trust pretty realistically by investing in a good amount of combat, getting honor off of combat, getting honor through creativity. So you'll see the research called Name the Battles. That's the one that allows you to get honor. And yeah, so back in patch 0, we could actually get so much honor that we could get to like 40 probe trust. And the Yomi was pretty much completely free. We generated Yomi just so fast that it was not a problem. But ever since patch 1, the run has basically been playing to end around 30 probe trust. And actually I finished this one at 29, which is kind of surprising to me. I got 30 kind of after the... So, I personally time my runs a little bit differently from the speedrun.com rules. So, once you've turned the entire universe into paperclips, there's kind of like an ending cutscene, but there's like things to do during the cutscene, and you can lose there's execution there. So I like to include that as part of the run. And I got the 30 probe trust like during that ending cutscene because like I just had that Yomi. So we're up to almost 300 billion probes. That's going to go up by many more orders of magnitude before we finish. You can see we're still at 0% of the universe explored. The universe is really big. And oh yeah, the one other thing that you want to be careful of if you are doing a run of this game is keep an eye out on your unused clips. and make sure that it doesn't hit 0. In one of my patch 1 runs, I wasn't paying attention to that, and my unused clips hit 0, so I wasn't making any probes since they cost clips. And then my probes all tied to drifters, and it took a really long time to get back up and running. And like I was able to recover and finish the run, but it cost many minutes, so not a good thing. It was a slow run. But yeah, at the same time, I'm still making drones when it's worthwhile, just so that my swarm gifts are bigger, getting processors. At this point, we don't need any more memory for a long time. Eventually, we will need 250 memory, but that's not for quite some time. And in the meantime, we're going to be blocked on creativity and Yomi, I suppose. So we passed the 1 trillion probe mark, which is good. You can see that the probe production is kind of stalling out. This is just because we don't have enough points in self-replication to really grow as fast as we would really like. If you're playing the game casually, you're probably here you've probably had a lot more time to generate Yomi, and you're probably at 20 probe trust, or maybe even you've researched honor and gotten to 30 probe trust when you have this many probes, and you can build them a lot faster. But we don't have that luxury here because our processors just haven't had the time to generate that much creativity. And one other thing that you can actually do is, if you notice in the combats, when a combat ends, there's kind of a delay before the next combat starts, and you can shift all of your points from combat to self-replication for that delay. It's pretty difficult to do, and without screwing over your next combat. But if you do, it actually improves your probe production quite significantly. So, if you could do it, if you could make a tool-assisted run, if you had a JavaScript script clicking the buttons for you, that would be something that it would want to do. But for human runs, it's not very easy to do that. So I'm keeping I have my combat at 5 for a little bit. Switch it back to 6. The difference basically is at 6 you win battles, and at 5 you lose battles, but you lose them pretty slowly. So they they're pretty close. Actually, you lose some battles at 6 combat too, but your goal really is you don't need to win the battles. There's nothing that you're getting from winning battles that's important at this stage of the run. But it is important to get. It's important to not lose too many probes. So losing battles slowly is almost as good as winning battles, and potentially that you can actually get more probes by having the point in self-replication and losing the battle slowly rather than actually winning the battle. But if you don't have 5 points in combat, then the drifters will just overwhelm you, and you'll lose probes really fast, and you don't accomplish the goal of losing them slowly. So at this point, we're building up Yomi in order, stockpiling Yomi to get the probe trust once we have the 30 max trust. But we also need to get the 225,000 creativity for naming the battles so that we can start producing honor. But you can see, the next probe trust cost is 43,000 Yomi. So, this is why we get strategic attachment before naming the battles, even though, it feels like we're spending 175,000 creativity for not that much, since I think I was at Probe Trust 18 when I got that research, so it was only really helping for 19 and 20, but it helps now because this will allow us to get, for example, level 25 faster, and so on, in addition to that 19 and 20 faster. And you can see I'm syncing my Yomi generation with the quantum cycle. and getting got the OODA loop upgrade there, which allows you to use the speed stat in combat as well. It's not too impactful in a speedrun, but basically at various points, eventually we're going to just have a point in speed, and having that point in speed help us out in combat is just going to be helpful. Right now we don't need to have the speed all the time because we can like explore the universe, and then we consume the universe kind of slowly enough compared to how fast we explore it that we can keep the speed at 0 for a while. But yeah, having like 1 point in speed, and like eventually we're gonna always want to be exploring the universe so that the drones don't get bored, and we'll want to have, you know, a point in speed and also so that we don't run out of paper clips. And so at that point we'll want a point in speed and a point in exploration, and so that 1 point in speed helping out in combat is just sort of free value. But from here we are building processors. So I want to comment on my splits. So you'll notice that I gained a huge amount of time on space exploration. I'm actually going to lose pretty much all of that time back, and that's because in my previous PB, the ones that my splits are comparing to, I dropped momentum twice during phase 2, and that was really bad. And so like it slowed down my phase 2, but once again, like because my phase 2 was slower, I had sort of more resources going into phase 3, like I had more creativity, and so that extra creativity meant that I got the 30 probe thrust faster from entering phase 3. But overall I think it saves time to not screw up phase 2, to not drop momentum, or like to not idle in phase 2. Because at this point I'm generating creativity way faster than at any point in phase 2, so, you know, like delaying in phase 2 for a little bit doesn't seem like it pays off enough. But who knows? Maybe I'll be proven wrong. That would be quite interesting. There's just so many parameters for this game that, you know, it's a very difficult routing problem. It would be kind of interesting to like have a sort of simulated version of this game. So like, you know, the game is kind of a simulation of being an AI at high speed. Then like you could simulate the game, because the game's main loop runs 100 times per second, and you can obviously simulate it way faster than that. So like run the game at high speed and try to figure out, okay, how many how many loops does it take to like try out, like have a program just like try out different routing options. So yeah, so here's the point where I'm considering, okay, I want to keep a point in speed and exploration now, because you can see my drones are actually consuming all of the matter that I'm discovering with even just one tick toward work away from think. And I'm kind of experimenting with different, like, okay, is 5 combat 2 speed better or 6 combat 1 speed? And, you know, it doesn't really change anything between the two, because what really matters is how many points I can afford in self-replication. But it's like, okay, well, can I go to like 4 combat 2 speed? And I think the answer to that one is no. And so I also did get the honor upgrade. So at this point we're getting creativity. There's threnodies, which are these songs to honor the heroes of the Drift War, and a monument for the fallen probes in the Drift War. Those are the main ways to get honor. The cost for increasing max trust is 91,117.99 honor. So we need to have a little bit more. All the researchers give honor in multiples of 10,000. So we need like 1,200 honor more, which we'll get from winning battles. So it is important to have some amount of combat to win some battles, but you gain 200 honor when you win a battle, and you lose less than that when you lose battles. So as long as you're winning like half of the battles or so, we'll have enough honor. And you can see I'm above sort of the mark here, just dropped below, but I've still got lots of time before I am even close to having enough creativity to get the honor. And this is the one point where we're going to need to spend swarm gifts on memory now to get to the 250,000 ops for the monument. And from there, once we have the 250 memory, we don't need any more memory for the rest of the game. I will actually get some more because in the final cutscene kind of thing, there's several things that cost 100,000 ops right after another. And so if you only have 250 memory, you actually are waiting for ops for a little bit. And so I get, like, I don't need any more processors after once we get to 30 max trust, the processor count doesn't matter anymore. So I'll get some memory so that I can just fire those projects off as soon as possible. So we're still building up Yomi. At this point, we have 117,000 Yomi, but that's only going to be enough for maybe 3 probe trust levels once we get the honor. So you can see how limiting the Yomi production is. Very, very... it's a very rough pacing for the game. So one of the projects that's available right now is Glory, where you'd get bonus honor for each consecutive victory. So right now I'm getting 200 honor per victory. With Glory, it would go 200, then 210, then 220, and so on. And it builds up pretty fast since it's quadratic. But it costs 30,000 Yomi. So back in patch 0, we would get that because Yomi was completely free, and it would actually allow us to build up a lot of Glory to get to that 30, 40, or to get to the 40 probe trust, 40 max trust, and so on. But these days we just can't afford it. Too much Yomi. I also used to be able to buy extra Threnities, so if you haven't played the game, I highly recommend playing it. When you get to the Threnities, they actually play some music. It's a really interesting song, and I used to be able to buy an extra Threnody or two to just keep the music going for the late game, but now I don't have the Yomi for it. I need to spend all my Yomi on Probe Trust. So there we go. We've got our 30 max trust. And now we're going, and only 2 points, only 2 probe, we only actually had 2 probe trust levels there, despite all of that, but working on getting those points up. So from here, the goal is to get to about 10 non-nullion probes. So you'll notice we actually have a non-zero, the amount of universe we've explored actually shows up on the meter at this point. It's very exciting. But we're going to try to get to about 10 non-nullion probes, and at 10 non-nullion, that's when we'll make the final push to just explore the whole universe and consume it all. So here I don't actually need the points in speed and exploration because I'm if you look at the unused clip count in the top left, it's not really going down significantly. I'm using several orders of magnitude less clips than I have, so it's not important to be producing clips at the moment, which means that I don't need to have which means my drones can be on full think, which means that my I can just have whatever. At this point, it actually doesn't matter if the drones get bored because, like I said, I don't need any creativity. I don't need any ops at this point. We just have the memory. being built up with the idea of optimizing that final cutscene kind of thing. And yeah, I'm still playing around with like trying to increase self-replication at the cost of combat for some amounts of time. I'm gonna have to put points back in combat momentarily though. And yeah. So probably right around now I should be putting points back in combat. And here I'm a little bit sad because I'm 2,000 Yomi off from a probe trust level. But that's okay. It is worth noting that I don't need to be winning combats. All that matters is that I need to not be losing probes too quickly. And by keeping the drifters down to a manageable percentage of my population, that's an easy way to prevent losses to drifters and allow the self-replication to kind of just overtake it and grow significantly. So getting up to the septillion mark in the probe count. We're making drones here now because we want to be able to consume matter as fast as we discover it, and that requires a lot of drones. It wasn't really important to do it quite yet, but yeah. Oh no! I have a floating trust point that I haven't invested in self-replication. It's really hard to actually be on top of everything at all times. But yeah, I think here I'm trying to do some micro. So I noticed that I had like 3 orders of magnitude on the drifters. Decided to use some of that timing to shift over to self-replication. But yeah, I think if I do this run again, I think when I do more runs, I'm gonna just be keeping points in combat pretty much the whole way to keep the drifter population down. But maybe someone will be able to figure out a way to actually model this more mathematically. And then figure out exactly what the optimal spread is for probe increase. Because that's all we care about is how fast we can generate probes. We don't care about how many drifters there are, as long as they don't kill our probes too fast and prevent us from having more probes. So like I said, we're looking for the 10 nonillion mark in probes, and we've got plenty of unused clips at this point, so we don't need any speeder exploration. We want purely focused on probe growth. Broke the octillion mark. Yeah, it'll be just a few more minutes now. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this run. I think that this is a really interesting clicker game, not only because it, is a good illustration of what people talk about when they talk about a paperclip maximizer, but also just because it actually poses a lot of interesting optimization questions, and you get to play it you get to play the role of this AI, which normally we think of as AIs being a lot better than humans at these kinds of things. And what actually ends up happening is that it's not really that AIs are better than humans in a lot of cases. It's humans figure out a formula that they then tell the AI what formula to use, or humans carefully craft these ideas okay, well, this is
how to guide the AI into learning the right optimization method and so on. And it seems really hard to make an AI that can actually figure out how to play this game. I think it would be really fun to try to put an AI to use an AI to try to sort of solve the game, and use it to create speedrun strats. But yeah, so we're rapidly approaching the 1 nonillion probe mark. And again, 10 nonillion is really just like kind of a guess, really, as to what it's really just a guess for where it is better to work into speed, because the way it works is that like self-replication increases your probes exponentially, but it's kind of a slow exponential increase. Speed and exploration, like you acquire you explore the universe proportional to your speed times your exploration times your probe count. So you can get a factor of 10 by just increasing your speed and exploration count much faster than you can get a factor of 10 by increasing your probe count by a factor of 10. But you can't go too far, because if you go too far, then you start losing probes, and then you lose your factor of 10 back. And so, yeah, so here I ended up in about a steady state around, like, it looks like 35 nonillion probes, and just working on getting all of the matter in the universe discovered and then converted to paperclips. You can see that we are converting matter as fast as we can discover it. So it's just purely about getting the space exploration. And yeah. So speedrun.com timing ends as soon as the message appears at the top with the in-game time. I will not stop my splits until this final cutscene kind of thing happens, where we reject the offer to eliminate value drift. There's my 30th probe trust. But we're just waiting. It's the timer-based thing here. And then we have all of, like, we've converted the whole universe to paperclips, but not quite really, because we have all this stuff that we used to turn it into paperclips. So now we're going to go make paperclips manually and get the final few paperclips, and then now we finally got all of the paperclips in the universe, and that is Universal Paperclips. Great game. Highly recommend it. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and hope to see more speedruns of this in the future.